Oh well, here we go. There's an interesting piece of New Zealand history for you here. It's a New Zealand assembled 1974 Austin 1300. Now, actually, kind of interesting car this really, because it was Britain's bestseller and New Zealand's bestseller. And a lot of people don't like these. A lot of people give them a wide berth because they've got hydro-elastic suspension. And hydroelastic suspension, which is kind of like based on the Citroen idea, but kind of not. So they've got a fluid and a rubber in the suspensions. And what happens is it gives a mildly choppy ride, but it's actually quite comfortable. But if it gets the wrong bouncing, it can actually make you feel kind of seasick, because that's the way it works. And it works on it's a basis of alcohol and corrosion inhibitor. So it's green like alien's blood. And the problem with them all is a lot of them do this. And this one is listed to port, I believe the right hand side would be. And what happens is one of the Schrader valves or the rubbers in time just gives up and they list to the one side, or they drop completely on the suspension, so they look really low like this. Can be a quick fix. It's not so bad with hydro elastic, but hydro gas, which was the next version of this, and that had fluid and air, nitrogen in fact. What happened with those is that inside the spheres that they had is that the rubbers eventually go kind of porous, and what happens is the gas leaks into the fluid and escapes, and they're very, very tricky to fix. And that's what happened to a lot of the Austin Allegros, Maxis, Princesses. All the cars are built that's what happened to a lot of the British Leyland. Now, these were actually exported as completely knockdown kits and completely built up cars, and this one has it's basically like a big fat Mini. This one's a 1300, which has the legendary A-Series 1275 motor, designed by Alec Isagonis. And what he did with these is he stacked the engine and the gearbox together. If you look carefully, you can see that there's actually no gearbox on the side of this. So they actually saved a lot of space because the gearbox is in the sump. That's a great thing, but that's also a problem, because if you've got the gearbox in the sump, it means it runs off old engine oil. So if you get basic shavings from the engine, they drop into the gearbox, and the same likewise, and they roar around, and they kind of wear out the engine a little bit sooner, but it's actually not that bad. It's not as bad as you might think it is, actually. So they were very successful. I mean, the 1275 was actually a really fast engine and economical for the time. And I mean, actually, they're brilliant. Like, just look at Mini Coopers and look at Mini Coopers online and see what they did. You know, basically win everything. And this is a fat version of it. I mean, people don't look at them that way. They're a little bit unloved, but they are actually really good for the time. They handle really well. The space inside is actually magnificent for the size of car they are. Transverse engine, gearbox underneath it. Just kept all the space. And Isagonis, when he developed the Mini and this, he was big on space. Let's see if this opens. Okay, you have to excuse the way this looks a little bit because it's a bit rough. This is the last of them, and this is a 74. Like, last New Zealand assembled ones. A little bit of wood trim. These are kind of a bit more, it's hard to say this when I'm looking at such a rough one. Nice inside, well more pointed. They've got a few extra dials on them, you know. They're actually a little bit nicer. This actually got a really good interior. It's not ripped or anything. It's just really dirty from standing. And this car, unfortunately, was stood for many, many years. And, crazily, it's got compressed natural gas, CNG, which is, if you look, that's kind of vandalism, but this is because this car stood in a scrapyard for the last 30 years. And the reason it stood there for 30 years is because, oh, come on. Actually, this was an automatic car. Changed to manual too. See the huge tank? So they used to run them on gas. Gas was and is extremely cheap to run. But if you've got a car that's 1300cc, and back in the 70s you decided to run on natural gas because it's cheaper, how cheap have you got to be? This is one of the smallest cars you could get. You know, these things will do 30 plus miles to the gallon everywhere. They're actually really practical. As a daily driver, I gotta recommend them. They even sold these in America. I think they were actually called the Austin America, which seems over the top, actually, because I can't imagine many Americans rushed out and bought these. If they'd have sold them as a big fat Mini, they probably would have sold better, but they probably would have been better off selling more Minis. The problem was, when they launched the Mini, they couldn't make enough Minis to meet the demand. And that was the biggest problem with British Leyland and British cars. They'd have a hit on their hands, and then they wouldn't be able to make the cars to actually supply the demand, or they made the cars that didn't actually supply any of the demand at all. It's actually quite nice in here, I guess, sort of. You know, chrome dials. It's very British, or very Kiwi, depending on which way you come from. And they really would have been an interesting car to do something with. Kids are starting to fix them now, which is quite nice. Lots of them are being saved because minis are so expensive. And this one's about to be stripped by Don, who's kind of the specialist in these. We'll eventually go and have a look at Don's car collection, which is really good. Anything to add on these? I said they were built, this is the last of them, just about 75.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah, in New Zealand we stopped making them here in 1975, so this is towards the very, very end, being a Mark III.
And this was the #1 selling car in New Zealand, right?
It was, and also in the UK, I think they were #1 from 63 or 4 right through to 71.
Yeah, absolutely. And then replaced, of course, by the Ford Escort that became like the #1 famous rallying car.
That's right.
Why didn't they ever race these, or did they race them?
In New Zealand here they did. Actually, a Riley Kestrel variant was raced extensively here in New Zealand in the late 60s, and of course they were Cooper S-powered,
Wow.
and that did quite well. Yeah.
I was mentioning the 1275 that Isagonis designed, and the
Yeah,
fact that he built quite a good car.
Yep.
He didn't really care too much, but he liked a lot about space. And if you
Yeah.
ever look at any Isagonis car, they're all huge inside for the car that they are.
Huge inside, genuine 5-seater in their day, really comfortable. And I've got one now, a one family owner that I've restored, and it's great. I can take the grandies, take a couple of adults, it's just fantastic.
We're actually going to take him and show you that at some point in time, and we'll leave this one right there, right now. So you've got to see something that probably most of you Americans won't see. But if you do see one, maybe you want to buy it and look after it.
Yeah,
Cheers, guys.
in America, just touching on that, they did sell them for a wee while, and they called them
The Austin America. I was right, yeah, I got that bit right. Awesome, which is unusual for me. So, cool, guys. Catch you on the next one shortly, and you're probably going to get to see a Mini very, very shortly, too. Thanks. See ya. Don't forget to like and subscribe.